Welcome back to the channel, friends. Today we venture into a land of sin and shadow, where every breath carries poison, where even darkness itself trembles in fear, and where one man has become more dangerous than death itself. If this is your first time on this channel, please hit that like button and subscribe with the bell icon turned on, because today's story will take you into a world where revenge is not just an emotion, but a living force. Imagine this scene. A man watches his wife and son die right before his eyes. Their screams echo in his ears. Blood streams through his fingers, but he cannot do anything. Then a cold blade is pressed against his own throat. Darkness falls. Death arrives. But the story does not end here, because moments later, he opens his eyes again. But now he is no longer just a man. Now inside him lives a spirit thousands of years old, the spirit of an elf who hates Sauron with the same intensity as this man does. Two bodies, one purpose, and a power that will shake the very foundations of Mordor. This is the story of Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor. This is the story of a ranger named Talion, whom death released, but life did not take back. This is the story of Celebrimbor, a wraith seeking redemption. You will see the shadow of Sauron attempting to cover Middle-earth once again. But most importantly, you will see a man who faces one question at every turn. When even death abandons you, what do you have left? The land of Mordor is covered in ash. The sky remains forever red and black, as if nature itself fears this place. Flames rise from every direction. The terrifying screams of orcs shatter the silence of night. The groans of slaves echo off stone and return. This is a place where hope comes to die. But one man is not just surviving here. He is fighting. He is taking revenge. And he is targeting every orc, every captain, every war chief who was present at the Black Gate that night. But then comes a turning point when Talion discovers that this journey is not happening by his will. He wants to forge another ring of power. Yes, the same ring you heard about in Lord of the Rings. But this will be a new ring, more powerful, more dangerous. And Celebrimbor says this is the only way to defeat Sauron. But Talion begins to doubt. Are they truly defeating Sauron, or are they becoming Sauron themselves? And when the final confrontation with the Black Hand occurs, the one who destroyed Talion's entire world, a secret is revealed that shakes both Talion and Celebrimbor to their core. The Black Hand is not a separate person. He is actually the body of someone else, someone whose body Sauron has possessed for thousands of years. And when his face is revealed, Celebrimbor's scream echoes throughout Mordor, because he is looking at his own face. So now the question is, how can a man fight someone who is using the body of his own spirit? How will Talion avenge that night when his enemy has stolen his very identity? And most important of all, if you had the chance to create a ring of power, could you reject it? Or would you make the same mistake that was made thousands of years ago? To find the answers to these questions, we must go back to the time when Talion's life was normal, when he had a home, a family, and a purpose. Because every great story begins with an ordinary life. And Talion's life was ordinary too, until that one night arrived. That night which changed everything. That night when blood was spilled at the Black Gate and a ranger's journey began that would take him to the very heart of Mordor. So let us begin this story. Let us see how a loving father and loyal soldier of the city became a grave walker, whom even death itself feared. Let us understand the complete story of Shadow of Mordor, with every secret, every twist, and every decision that Talion made. But before we dive into Talion's personal tragedy, we need to understand the world he lived in. Because Mordor is not just a place on a map, it's a living, breathing nightmare. It is a realm where evil does not hide in shadows, but walks openly in daylight. So let us first explore this dark world, its politics, its people, and its terrible beauty. Mordor. Even the name itself carries weight. When you hear this word, your mind immediately conjures images of darkness, fire, and despair. And you would be absolutely correct. But Mordor is far more complex than just a simple evil wasteland. It is a fully functioning war machine, a carefully organized hierarchy of brutality, and a land with its own twisted sense of order. The story of Shadow of Mordor takes place approximately 60 years before the events of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Sauron has been defeated once before, but he is not truly gone. His spirit endures, slowly rebuilding his strength in the shadows. The great tower of Barad-dûr is rising again. The fires of Mount Doom burn with renewed hunger. And across Mordor, his armies are gathering, preparing for the day when their master will return in full power. Geographically, Mordor is divided into distinct regions, each with its own character and dangers. The northern region is called Udun, a harsh wasteland that sits in the shadow of the Black Gate itself. This is where our story truly begins. Udun is a desolate place, covered in volcanic ash and dotted with orc encampments. The ground is cracked and barren. Pools of toxic water gather in craters. The air tastes of sulfur and smoke. Here, the orcs have built crude fortresses and training grounds where they prepare for war. Slave pens hold captured humans who are worked to death in the forges and mines. The southern region is called the Sea of Nirnen, and it presents a stark contrast to Udun. Here, there is actual vegetation. Green fields exist, though they are cultivated by enslaved humans under the brutal oversight of orc overseers. Large bodies of water provide fish and irrigation. Small settlements dot the landscape where human captives try to maintain some semblance of life under impossible conditions. This region produces food for Sauron's armies, and the humans here live in constant fear, knowing that their usefulness is the only thing keeping them alive. Between these regions stand massive fortresses, strongholds where the most powerful orc war chiefs rule their domains. These are not simple camps, but true military installations with walls, towers, and defenses. Each fortress is a center of power, and the war chief who controls it commands hundreds of orcs, including numerous captains who serve as his lieutenants. The atmosphere of Mordor is oppressive in every sense. The sky is rarely clear. Ash falls like snow, coating everything in gray. When you look up, you see clouds stained red by the fires below, creating a perpetual twilight. The sun barely appears as a weak, bloody disk. At night, the darkness is absolute except for the glow of countless fires. The forges never stop. The furnaces never cool. The sound of hammers on metal rings constantly through the valleys. But Mordor is not just a physical place. It is a society twisted and brutal as it may be. At the very top of this hierarchy sits Sauron himself, though during the time of our story, he has not yet regained physical form. His presence is felt everywhere. His eye watching, his will commanding, but he operates through his servants. Chief among these servants are the Black Captains, three powerful beings who command Sauron's forces directly. The first is the Black Hand of Sauron, the supreme commander of all military forces. He is a figure of pure terror, a being of immense dark power who conducts horrific rituals and oversees. The second is the Hammer of Sauron, the master torturer and enforcer. Where the Black Hand commands strategy, the Hammer enforces discipline through fear and pain. He breaks the will of enemies and ensures loyalty through the most brutal methods imaginable. The third is the Tower of Sauron, who controls the fortresses and defensive positions throughout Mordor. He is the architect of Sauron's military infrastructure, the one who ensures that every stronghold is impregnable and every position is defended. Beneath these three Black Captains exists a complex hierarchy of orc society. At the regional level, war chiefs rule vast territories. Each war chief commands multiple fortresses and controls hundreds of warriors. These are not simple brutes, but cunning leaders who maintain power through a combination of strength, fear, and political maneuvering. A war chief's position is never secure. Ambitious captains constantly plot to overthrow them, and weakness is met with immediate challenge. Below the war chiefs are the captains, mid-level commanders who lead smaller war bands and control specific areas. These captains are the backbone of orc military power. They are tough, experienced fighters who have survived countless battles. Each captain has a name, a personality, and a unique set of strengths and weaknesses. Some are immune to certain types of attacks. Others have gang of bodyguards. Some fear specific things like fire or wild beasts. This diversity makes them unpredictable and dangerous. The orc society itself is fascinating in its brutality. There is no room for mercy or compassion. Betrayal is not only common but expected. An orc who sees weakness in his superior is practically obligated to challenge him. This creates a constant state of internal conflict where everyone is simultaneously watching their backs and looking for opportunities to advance. Orcs celebrate their victories with feasts, where they consume vast amounts of meat and grog, a foul alcoholic beverage. These celebrations often turn violent as drunken orcs challenge each other to fights or settle old grudges. The revelry can be heard for miles, a cacophony of roaring laughter, angry shouting, and the clash of weapons. They have their own superstitions and fears as well. Orcs fear certain creatures native to Mordor, particularly the Caragors, large predatory cat-like beasts that hunt in the wilderness, and the ghouls, disease who seems to appear and disappear like a phantom, absolutely terrifying for them. Despite their brutality, orcs are not mindless. They use tactics, set ambushes, and employ strategy. Their weapons are crude but effective. Their armor, though rough, provides solid protection. And when organized under a strong leader, they become a truly formidable military force. The human population in Mordor. lives in a state of absolute despair. These are not volunteers or willing servants. They are slaves, captured during raids on outlying settlements of Gondor and Rohan. They are branded, beaten, and worked until they drop. In the forges, they labor in unbearable heat, crafting weapons and armor for orc armies. In the fields of Nirnen, they toil under the knowing nothing else. A few humans have risen to positions of relative power by collaborating with their orc masters, but they are despised by their fellow captives and live in constant fear of losing their precarious status. Yet even here, resistance exists. Small groups of humans hide in the wilderness, conducting raids and sabotaging orc operations when possible. They are led by figures like Queen Marwen and her daughter Lithariel, nobles who were captured but refused to be broken. These resistance fighters represent the last spark of hope in a hopeless place. The political situation in Mordor during this time is one of preparation and anticipation. Sauron is gathering his strength but has not yet revealed himself fully to the world. Gondor knows something is wrong. Their rangers, including Talion, are stationed at the Black Gate to watch for signs of military buildup. But they believe they are monitoring a defeated enemy slowly recovering. They do not realize they are standing at the gates of a war machine that will soon attempt to conquer all of Middle-earth. The Black Gate itself is a massive fortification, two enormous towers connected by a wall that blocks the main pass into Mordor. It was built by Gondor in ages past, when they were strong enough to contain evil, rather than just watch it. Now it serves as the first line of defense and observation. A small garrison of rangers mans this post, and among them is Talion and his family. The architecture throughout Mordor reflects its evil purpose. Everything is built for war or industry. There is no beauty here, only function. Orc structures are rough and angular, built from black stone and iron. Bridges span chasms, allowing armies to move quickly. Watchtowers provide observation points. Though still under construction during this time, already looms over everything, a dark needle piercing the sky, a monument to Sauron's ambition. The sounds of Mordor are as oppressive as its sights. The constant hammering from forges creates a rhythmic backdrop to everything. Orc war drums boom across distances, signaling troop movements or celebrations. The roars and challenges of orcs echo off mountains. Slaves cry out in pain. Whips crack. Metal scrapes on metal. And underneath it all, a low rumble, like the earth itself groaning under the weight of so much evil. At night, the darkness is filled with different sounds. Caragors howl in the distance. Ghouls make their unsettling clicking noises as they search for corpses. Patrols march with the tramp of heavy boots. Occasionally, screams pierce the night as someone is tortured or executed. The smell of Mordor is equally terrible. Sulfur from volcanic vents fills the air. The stench of unwashed orc bodies mixes with the coppery smell of blood. Near the forges, the smell of hot metal and burning coal dominates. In areas where battles have occurred, the sweet, sick smell of decay lingers. This is the world into which our hero will be thrust. This is the realm where he will wage his war of revenge. Understanding Mordor is essential to understanding Talion's journey, because Mordor is not just a setting, but a character itself. It is the embodiment of everything Talion will fight against, and everything he risks becoming. The power structures are maintained through fear and violence, but also through a kind of order. Sauron's will provides direction. The Black Captains provide leadership. The War Chiefs provide regional control. The Captains provide tactical command, and the common orcs provide the muscle. It is a pyramid of evil. But here is what makes Mordor truly dangerous. It is adaptable. When Talion kills a captain, another rises to take his place. When he overthrows a war chief, the power vacuum creates conflict, as multiple captains vie for the position. The hierarchy is self-healing in a way. Mordor is like a hydra. Cut off one head and two more grow back. And at the heart of it all, in the depths of Barad-dûr, Sauron's spirit waits and watches. He is patient. He has existed for thousands of years. A few more decades of rebuilding means nothing to him. His eye sees much, though not everything. His will reaches far, though not everywhere. And his plans are vast, encompassing not just the conquest of Middle-earth, but the domination of all free peoples. This is the world that Talion will navigate. This is the darkness he will face, and this is the evil that will test not just his strength and skill, but his very soul. Because in fighting monsters, one must take care not to become a monster, and in Mordor, that line is thinner than anywhere else in Middle-earth. Before darkness consumed everything, before death became a companion rather than an end, there was simply a man. His name was Talion, and if you had met him during those peaceful days, you would have seen nothing extraordinary. No prophecy hung over his head. No ancient power slumbered within his soul. He was a ranger of Gondor, one of many who served the realm with quiet dedication. Talion stood at average height for a man of Gondor, perhaps just shy of 6 feet. His build reflected years of military training and patrol duty. Lean muscle hardened by constant movement through rough terrain. His face bore the weathering of a man who spent more time outdoors than in, with lines around his eyes from squinting against sun and wind. Dark hair, kept practical and short, showed the first threads of gray at the temples. His hands were... There was nothing soft about him, but neither was there cruelty. His eyes held warmth when he looked at his family, and that warmth defined him more than any physical attribute. Those who served alongside Talion knew him as dependable. When he gave his word, it meant something. If he told you he would take the first watch, you could sleep soundly, knowing he would stay alert until dawn. If he said he would check the northern pass, every stone would be examined, every shadow investigated. This reliability made him valuable, though it never earned him high rank. Talion was not ambitious in the traditional sense. He did not seek glory or advancement. His aspirations were simpler, and in their own way, more profound. What drove Talion was protection. He had seen what happened when evil went unchecked, heard stories from older rangers about the devastation Sauron's forces could unleash. His posting at the Black Gate was not punishment but duty, and he accepted it fully. Every day he stood watch. He was buying time for farmers to harvest crops, for children to grow up in peace, for ordinary people to live ordinary lives. That was enough for him. His personality reflected his values. Talion was not particularly talkative, but when he spoke, people listened, because his words carried weight. He did not waste breath on empty conversation or boasting. Humor existed in him, dry and understated, usually emerging during the tedium of long patrols when spirits needed lifting. He could make his fellow rangers laugh with a well-timed observation or a perfectly delivered, deadpan comment about their latest meal of dried meat and hard bread. But what truly defined Talion was his capacity for love. When his duties ended for the day and he returned to his modest quarters, everything about him changed. The stern ranger face softened. His voice, normally clipped and military, took on gentle tones. This transformation revealed the real Talion, the man beneath the soldier. His wife Yorith was the anchor of his world. She had the kind of beauty that deepens with time rather than fading, her face reflecting intelligence and a kindness in equal measure. Where Talion was stoic, she was expressive. Where he was silent, she filled spaces with warmth and words. They had met years ago in Minas Tirith during one of his rare leaves from duty. Their courtship had been brief but intense, both recognizing in each other something fundamental and necessary. She had known, even then, that marrying a ranger meant long separations. Eorith made their quarters at the Black Gate feel like a home rather than a military posting. She cultivated a small garden in defiance of Mordor's shadow, coaxing flowers and herbs from reluctant soil. She prepared meals that reminded Talion of civilization, of normalcy, of everything they were defending. When he woke from nightmares about orc attacks or failed defenses, her presence brought him back to reality, her touch grounding him. They spoke of the future in quiet moments, making plans that seemed both impossible and inevitable. When his service ended, they would return to Gondor proper, perhaps find a small holding where they could live simply. Talion would teach their son the skills of survival and honor. Eorith would finally have the garden she truly wanted, sprawling and wild and beautiful. These dreams sustained them through the harsh reality of their current situation. Their son, Deerhail, represented everything good that could exist even in darkness. 8 years old, he possessed his mother's curious nature and his father's quiet strength. The boy was at that perfect age where childhood innocence mixed with emerging understanding of the world. He asked endless questions about everything, driving both parents to exhaustion and joy simultaneously. Why do orcs hate us? How far is Minas Tirith? What makes stars shine? Can I be a ranger like you? Talion taught his son what he could, modified lessons in swordplay using wooden practice weapons, stories of Gondor's history told around their small fire, the basics of reading terrain and weather. He was careful to balance honesty with hope, never lying about the dangers they faced, but also emphasizing that good people stood against those dangers. Deerhail absorbed these lessons with serious attention, occasionally break. The boy loved his father with uncomplicated devotion. When Talion returned from patrol, Deerhail would run to greet him, talking rapidly about everything that had happened during the separation. He would follow his father around during off-duty hours, content simply to be in his presence. At night, he insisted on hearing stories, and Talion would recount legends of ancient heroes, careful to emphasize their virtues rather than just their victories. Ioreth and Deerhail were not just Talion's family. They were his reason. Every morning when he strapped on his sword and stepped out to patrol, he did so knowing that he was standing between them and evil. Every night when he returned, he felt the rightness of his purpose confirmed. This was what duty truly meant. Not abstract service to a distant throne, but concrete protection of specific beloved people. The small family unit at the Black Gate represented something profound. In the shadow of Mordor, in a place designed to embody despair, they had created light. Their laughter, their conversations, their simple existence was an act of defiance against everything Sauron stood for. Evil sought to make the world cold and cruel and empty. They filled their corner of it with warmth and love and hope. Talion's skills as a ranger were considerable, honed by years of experience. He could track prey or enemies across difficult terrain, reading signs in disturbed earth or broken vegetation that others would miss. His swordsmanship was practical rather than flashy, focused on efficiency and survival. He knew how to move quietly, how to use terrain for advantage, how to fight multiple opponents when necessary. These were not exotic abilities, but professional competencies, the toolkit of a man who took his work seriously. He understood tactics and strategy at the small unit level, when to engage and when to withdraw, how to use elevation and cover, the importance of supply lines and communication. If ordered to delay an enemy force, he could do so. If tasked with reconnaissance, his reports would be detailed and accurate. He was not a general or a hero of legend, but a solid, reliable soldier who could be counted on. Beyond military skills, Talion possessed the knowledge of a man who lived close to nature. He could find water in seemingly barren land, identify edible plants, build shelter from available materials, start fire in wet conditions. These survival skills meant he could operate independently for extended periods, a necessary capability for a ranger often sent on long patrols, far from support. His moral compass pointed true north. Right and wrong were not abstract concepts for Talion, but concrete realities that demanded action. When he saw injustice, he intervened. When he witnessed cruelty, he stopped it if possible. This instinct came naturally, not from philosophy or religious teaching, but from something fundamental in his character. He could no more ignore suffering than he could stop breathing. Yet Talion was not without fear. He feared for his family constantly, knowing how vulnerable they were so close to Mordor. He feared failure, the possibility that his vigilance might lapse at the wrong moment, allowing danger through. He feared what would happen if Sauron's forces ever launched a full assault on the Black Gate, knowing their small garrison could not hold indefinitely. These fears did not paralyze him, but motivated him, sharpening his attention and driving his dedication. There existed in Talion a deep reservoir of strength that even he did not fully recognize. When pushed, he could endure beyond normal limits. When faced with impossible choices, he could act decisively. When everything seemed lost, he could find one more step forward. This strength would be tested beyond anything he could imagine, but it existed within him already, forged by years of duty and love. The life Talion had built was modest by the standards of Gondor's nobility, but it was rich in the ways that truly mattered. He had purpose, family, and honor. Each day brought its challenges, but also its satisfactions. Each night brought rest earned through meaningful work. This was enough. This was everything. And then, in a single night of blood and betrayal and supernatural horror, all of it was taken away. The man who had been Talion ceased to exist in any normal sense. What remained would be something new, something the world had never seen before. But understanding what he became requires first understanding what he was, who he loved, and what he lost. Before we witness that loss, we must meet the other presence that would share Talion's fate. Celebrimbor was not a man, but a memory. Not alive, but unable to die. Not a ghost, but not entirely spirit either. He existed in a state between worlds, and his story reached back thousands of years to an age when elves walked openly in Middle-earth, and Sauron wore a fair face. Celebrimbor had been, in life, one of the greatest elven smiths who ever lived. His skill in crafting exceeded nearly all others, matched perhaps only by Fëanor himself. Where Fëanor was driven by pride and passion, Celebrimbor was motivated by the desire to create beauty and utility, to make objects that would serve and endure. His works were renowned throughout Middle-earth, sought by kings and valued above gold. He was tall, as all elves are, with the timeless features of his kind. Dark hair fell past his shoulders. His eyes held the depth that came from centuries of life and learning. His hands, the hands of a craftsman, were precise and strong, capable of shaping metal with a delicacy that seemed impossible. In life, he had carried himself with quiet confidence, secure in his abilities without arrogance. Celebrimbor had ruled over a region, a realm of elf-smiths and craftsmen. Under his leadership, the land prospered. The forges of a region produced works of such quality that they seemed almost magical, imbued with properties beyond what mere skill should achieve. This was the height of elven civilization in Middle-earth, a golden age of art and craft. Then came Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. He appeared as a being of great beauty and wisdom, claiming to be an emissary from the Valar, the gods of Middle-earth. He spoke of teaching the elves even greater skills, of helping them create works that would preserve their fading power in the world. Celebrimbor, eager to learn and create, welcomed him. Together, Annatar and Celebrimbor worked in the forges. The supposed emissary shared knowledge of ringcraft, the art of binding power into small objects that could amplify the wearer's abilities. This was new magic, potent and seductive. Celebrimbor threw himself into the work with all his considerable skill and passion. The project consumed him, became his obsession. But Celebrimbor, in his enthusiasm and trust, did not see the trap being prepared. He did craft 3 rings without Annatar's direct involvement, using the knowledge gained but working alone. These would be the elven rings, greater than the others, untouched by corruption. They held the power to preserve and protect, to keep what was precious safe from the ravages of time. Celebrimbor was proud of these creations, seeing them as his greatest achievement. Then Annatar revealed his true identity. He was Sauron, the Dark Lord, who had served Morgoth in ancient wars. Everything had been manipulation. The ringcraft knowledge was designed with a flaw, a vulnerability. In secret, Sauron had forged one final ring, the one ring in the fires of Mount Doom. This master ring could control all the others, dominate anyone who wore them, bend them to Sauron's will. When Sauron first put on the One Ring, every bearer of the other rings felt it. The deception crashed down on Celebrimbor with devastating force. He had been used. His skill turned against everything he valued. The rings he had crafted with such care were instruments of domination. His desire to create beauty and utility had been twisted into a tool for enslavement. Celebrimbor's reaction was immediate and defiant. He hid the 3 elven rings, ensuring Sauron could never claim them. He rallied Eregion's defenders, prepared for the war he knew would come. He sent warnings throughout Middle-earth, revealing Sauron's treachery. In doing so, he became Sauron's greatest enemy, the one who had seen behind the mask and refused to submit. Sauron's armies came with Celebrimbor fought with courage and skill, but even the greatest elf could not stand against entire armies enhanced by the power of the One Ring. He was captured, dragged before Sauron in chains. What followed was torture beyond description. Sauron wanted the location of the 3 elven rings, wanted to complete his domination of all ringcraft. Celebrimbor refused to speak, enduring agony with stubborn silence. Days became weeks, became months. His body was broken repeatedly, healed through dark magic, broken again. Still, he would not reveal where he had hidden the rings. In rage and frustration, Sauron turned his cruelty toward Celebrimbor's family. His wife and daughter, captured during Eregion's fall, were brought before him. Sauron made Celebrimbor watch as they were tortured, using his love against him as the ultimate weapon. The screams of his beloved echoed in the dungeons, and Celebrimbor could do nothing, say nothing that would save them without betraying everything. They died in front of him, slowly, painfully, their lives snuffed out while Sauron watched his reaction, searching for any sign of breaking will. Celebrimbor wept, screamed, begged, but did not reveal the ring's locations. That small victory was purchased with the highest price imaginable. Finally, Sauron killed Celebrimbor himself. But even in death, the elf-smith defied him. His body was used as a war banner, paraded before armies as a symbol of Sauron's power. Yet Celebrimbor's spirit did not pass into the halls of the dead where elves go. His hatred, his need for vengeance, his refusal to accept defeat bound him to the mortal world as a wraith. For thousands of years, Celebrimbor existed in this tortured state. He watched ages pass, saw his beloved Eregion fade from memory, witnessed the wraith could not rest, could not find peace, could not let go of the burning need to undo what he had helped create. Every ring, still in existence, was a reminder of his failure. Every victim of Sauron's evil was partially his responsibility. This was the being that would merge with Talion, ancient, powerful, driven by guilt and rage in equal measure. Where Talion sought simple revenge for his family, Celebrimbor carried the weight of thousands of years of regret. Where Talion had clear morals, Celebrimbor had learned that good intentions could lead to catastrophic consequences. Where Talion valued life and love, Celebrimbor had lost everything he valued and become something that existed outside normal life. The union of these two souls would create something unprecedented, a living man with a wraith's power, an ancient elf's knowledge housed in human flesh. Grief compounded by grief, rage multiplied by rage. Neither could have imagined, before that terrible night at the Black Gate, that their fates would become intertwined. Neither would have chosen it willingly, but choice was about to be taken from both of them. The night began, like countless others before it. Talion completed his patrol of the Black Gate's northern wall as the sun disappeared behind Mordor's mountains, painting the ash clouds in shades of blood. The routine was ingrained after months of service. Check the watch posts. Speak briefly with each ranger on duty. Scan the wastes beyond for any sign of increased orc activity. Report to the garrison commander. Return to family. Simple, predictable, safe. There had been no warnings. No scouts returned with alarming news. No increase in enemy movements. The orcs beyond the gate continued their usual chaotic existence, squabbling amongst themselves, conducting small raids on each other's territories. If anything, the past weeks had been quieter than usual. Some rangers joked that perhaps Sauron Talion should have felt the wrongness in that quiet. Years of experience should have triggered some instinct, some premonition, but exhaustion dulled his edge, and the prospect of a peaceful evening with Ioreth and Deerhail drew him home with thoughts of rest rather than vigilance. This failure would haunt him in ways he could not yet comprehend. He entered their quarters to find the small space warm with firelight and the smell of stew. Deerhail was practicing letters, his tongue sticking out slightly as he concentrated on forming each character correctly. Ioreth stirred the pot, humming a melody from her childhood in Gondor. The scene was so perfectly normal, so achingly domestic, that Talion paused in the doorway to drink it in. This was what he protected. This was what gave meaning to endless cold nights on stone walls. The meal passed with easy conversation. Deerhail shared a story about a spider he had found in the garden, describing its web with the elaborate detail only a child could muster. Ioreth spoke of her plans to expand their small herb garden, wondering if she could coax rosemary to grow in such hostile soil. Talion listened more than he talked, content to let their voices wash over him. He held Ioreth's hand under the table, a small gesture that meant everything. After dinner, he helped Deerhail with reading practice, sounding out words from an old book of legends. The boy struggled with some pronunciations, but refused to give up, his determination reminding Talion of himself at that age. When sleep finally claimed Deerhail, Talion carried him to bed, feeling the weight of his son in his arms and knowing with fierce certainty that he would do anything to keep this child safe. He and Ioreth sat together by the dying fire, her head resting on his shoulder. They did not need words. The comfort of presence was enough. She fell asleep there, and Talion carefully moved her to their bed, covering her with blankets worn soft by years of use. He should have joined her, let sleep take him as well. Instead, some instinct kept him alert, drew him to the window overlooking the courtyard. That was when he saw the first torch go out, not extinguished naturally, but suddenly, as if smothered. Then another, then a third. Darkness crept across the garrison with unnatural purpose. Talion's hand went to his sword, even as his mind struggled to process what was happening. Attack? But how? The walls were intact, the gate sealed, the watchposts manned. The screaming started then. Not the shouts of rangers calling alarm, but genuine screams of terror and agony, cut short with sickening finality. Talion moved without thinking, years of training overriding the paralysis of shock. He grabbed his full sword belt, checked that his dagger was secure, and turned to wake Ioreth. She was already awake, eyes wide with fear but controlled. She had lived with a ranger long enough to know what those sounds meant. Her first words were not for herself, but for their son. "Dear Hale?" Talion moved to the boy's bed, found him stirring, but still drowsy, confused by the noise. There was no time for gentle explanations. "We need to go, now. Stay silent." His voice carried the authority that made Eorith move immediately, scooping up Deerhale, even as she grabbed the small pack they kept prepared for emergencies. It contained water, dried food, basic medical supplies, and a few precious personal items. Talion had insisted on maintaining this pack, a precaution that had seemed paranoid. Now it might save their lives. They moved toward the door, but Talion stopped, hand raised. Footsteps in the corridor, heavy and numerous. Orc footsteps. Impossible. How had orcs gotten inside the Black Gate? The defenses were too strong, the walls too high, the rangers too vigilant. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The garrison had been infiltrated, overwhelmed before it could mount effective resistance. Talion changed direction, moving toward the window. It faced the courtyard, but better to risk a drop than face what was in the corridor. He looked out and froze. The courtyard was filled with orcs, hundreds of them, organized and purposeful. In the center stood a figure in black armor, emanating authority and malice. The Black Hand. Stories about the Black Hand circulated among rangers, whispered warnings about Sauron's supreme commander. Some dismissed these stories as exaggeration, myth-making designed to frighten children. Seeing him now, Talion knew every story had been understatement. The figure radiated wrongness, a presence that felt like a wound in reality itself. Around the Black Hand, rangers were being herded together, forced to their knees. Those who resisted died quickly. Those who complied lived slightly longer, but the terror in their faces suggested death would be a mercy. Talion recognized every face, men he had served with, shared meals with, trusted with his life. Now they were helpless, waiting for whatever horror came next. The door to their quarters exploded inward. Splinters flew as orc warriors poured through. Talion pushed Eoreth and Deerhile behind him, drew his sword, and met the first attacker with a strike that opened the orc's throat. The second fell to a thrust through the eye. The third lost his sword arm to a desperate slash. But there were too many, and Talion knew it even as he fought. They swarmed him, dragging him down through sheer numbers. His sword was torn from his grip. Arms pinned his limbs despite his struggles. He saw other orcs seize Eoreth and Deerhale, heard their cries, and felt rage explode through him with such force that he nearly broke free. Nearly. Massive fists struck his head, dazing him enough that the orcs could secure his bonds. They were dragged into the courtyard, thrown to the ground before the Black Hand. Talion's vision swam, blood running from a cut above his eye, but he forced himself to focus. Eoreth was pulled to her knees beside him. Deerhale clutched in her arms. The boy was crying now, the confusion giving way to fear as he sensed the adult's terror. The Black Hand surveyed the assembled rangers with something that might have been satisfaction. When he spoke, his voice carried unnatural resonance, each word striking like a physical blow. "You have watched Mordor for so long, little men. Tonight, Mordor watches back. one of the captured rangers, a veteran named Hergon who had served at the Black Gate for a decade, spat at the Black Hand's feet. "You'll get nothing from us. Gondor will know of this attack. Armies will come." His defiance was admirable and futile in equal measure. The Black Hand moved with sudden speed, far faster than his armored bulk suggested possible. One moment he stood at distance, the next his gauntleted hand gripped Hergon's face. There was a flash of sickly green light, a smell of burning, and Hergon's scream cut through the night. When the Black Hand released him, Hergon fell limp, eyes empty, mouth slack. Alive but broken, his mind shattered by whatever power had been unleashed. "I need nothing from you," the Black Hand said, addressing all the rangers, but looking at Talion specifically. "Your deaths are not interrogation. They are ritual. Blood freely given in service. Blood taken by force from enemies. Blood of the innocent. 3 offerings to power the return of my master." Talion's mind raced, trying to find any escape, any option. The bonds were too tight, the orcs too numerous, the Black Hand too powerful. But he had to try something, anything, for Ioreth, for Deerhail. They could not die here. He would not allow it. The Black Hand gestured, and orcs began executing rangers one by one. No speeches, no final words, just efficient butchery. Each death fueled some invisible working. Each life snuffed out, feeding power into the ritual the Black Hand was conducting. Talion could feel it, a wrongness in the air growing stronger with each corpse. Then, the Black Hand turned to Talion specifically. There is something different about you. Stubborn spirit, strong will. Your death will carry more weight than these others." He moved closer, and Talion could see his face beneath the helmet, pale and twisted, eyes that held nothing human or merciful. "Please." Ioreth's voice, cracking with desperation. "Please, take me, take him. Just let our son go. He's only a child. He's done nothing to you." The Black Hand tilted his head, considering her with the same attention he might give an insect. "The child has done nothing, true, but innocence is itself a form of power, the purest offering." He nodded to the orc guards. What happened next would replay in Talion's mind for eternity. Every detail burned into his consciousness with perfect, horrific clarity. 2 orcs grabbed Ioreth, pulling her away from Deerhail, despite her desperate grip. The boy reached for his mother, crying her name. A 3rd orc held Talion's head, forcing him to watch, denying him even the mercy of looking away. The Black Hand drew a curved blade, its edge gleaming with dark enchantment. He placed it against Ioreth's throat. Her eyes found Talion's across the distance. In that moment, everything they had shared, every private joke and quiet conversation and tender touch, every plan they had made for their future, all of it passed between them in silent acknowledgement. She mouthed words he could not hear, but understood perfectly. "I love you. Protect him." The blade drew across her throat with efficient cruelty. Blood poured down her chest, black in the torchlight. Her eyes remained on Talion's, even as life fled them, holding his gaze until the last possible moment. When she fell, when her body hit the ground with a sound that would echo forever in his memory. Something inside Talion shattered. Deerhail's screams cut through the courtyard. The boy fought against the orcs holding him, kicked and bit and struggled with all the strength of childhood desperation. He called for his mother, then for his father, voice breaking on the words, "Papa, please. Papa, help." Talion could not help, could not move, could not do anything but bear witness as the black hand approached his son. The rage inside him was white hot, burning away everything else, but his body remained bound. He fought against the ropes until his wrists bled, knowing it was useless, unable to stop trying. The black hand knelt before Deerhail, studying the terrified child. "You see," he said, speaking to Talion, "this is power's true lesson. All your training, all your duty, all your honor amounts to nothing when force is applied with sufficient will. You are helpless. Your family dies regardless of your wishes. This is reality." Deerhail looked past the black hand to Talion, seeking reassurance his father could not provide. The boy was 8 years old, 8 years of life, of learning and growing and discovering the world. 8 years of love and laughter and the small joys that make existence worthwhile. It was not enough time. It would never have been enough time, but it was especially cruel that he would get no more. "Be brave," Talion managed to choke out, forcing the words past the agony constricting his throat. "Like the heroes in the stories. Be brave, my son." Deerhail nodded, tears streaming down his face, trying so hard to be what his father asked. The black hand almost seemed to hesitate, the closest thing to recognition he had shown all night. Then his blade moved, and Deerhail's attempt at bravery ended in a small, confused gasp. The world stopped. Time itself seemed to freeze as Talion watched his son's body fall beside his wife's. The two people who had made his life meaningful, who had given purpose to every day, who had been his reason for existing, lay dead in the dirt of the Black Gate's courtyard. Their blood mixed, flowing together as their lives drained away. Something broke in Talion then. Not just grief, though the grief was crushing. Not just rage, though the rage was infinite. Something fundamental to his being shattered, leaving spaces that would never be whole again. The man named Talion, Ranger of Gondor, husband and father, died in that moment, even though his heart still beat. The black hand stood, wiping his blade on Deerhail's small tunic. "Your turn," he said, with complete disinterest, as if he had just completed a tedious chore. "Any last words?" Talion found he had none. Words were meaningless. Everything was meaningless. He wanted death, not as escape, but as reunion. A way to follow his family into whatever came after. Let the black hand complete his ritual. Let existence end. There was nothing left worth preserving. The blade touched his throat, cold and sharp. The black hand began the cut, slow and deliberate, drawing it out. Pain registered distantly, unimportant compared to the greater agony already consuming Talion. He felt his blood flowing, warmth spreading across his chest. His vision darkened at the edges. His hearing faded. Consciousness slipped away. This should have been the end. Death claimed him. His spirit should have passed beyond the circles of the world, moved on to whatever fate awaited men. But something intervened. In the space between life and death, in that transition from existence to oblivion, another presence reached out. Celebrimbor, had been drawn by the ritual, by the concentration of death and power. The wraith sensed an opportunity, a chance to act after thousands of years of frustrated impotence. Here was a man dying, his spirit strong despite his broken body, his will to fight not extinguished, but transformed into something deeper and darker. Here was a vessel, unwilling perhaps, but available. The merging was violent, unnatural, a collision of incompatible forces. Talion's spirit, trying to depart, was anchored back to his body. Celebrimbor's wraith essence, existing outside normal life, was bound to mortal flesh. Neither asked for this union, neither wanted it, but the Black Hand's ritual had created conditions where such an impossible joining could occur, and both spirits were caught in its effect. Talare Celebralian's eyes snapped open. His throat, cut deep enough to kill, sealed itself with unnatural speed. The Black Hand, turning away satisfied with his work, spun back in shock. The assembled orcs, ting their master's success, fell silent in confusion and growing fear. Talion rose to his feet, bonds falling away as if made of paper. But it was not quite Talion anymore. The presence moving his body was something new, something unprecedented. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that had not existed before, as if two beings spoke simultaneously. No. That single word carried such weight that several orcs stumbled backward. The Black Hand recovered quickly, raising one armored hand to unleash whatever dark power he commanded. Energy gathered, sickly green and crackling with malice. He released it directly at Talion's chest. A blast struck and dissipated. Where it should have burned and killed, it found purchase on nothing. Talion, or the being wearing his body, reached out with one hand. Spectral energy, silver and cold, manifested around his fingers. The wraith power that was Celebrimbor's nature, now channeled through Talion's flesh, creating effects that should not exist. The Black Hand's confidence cracked. He barked orders to his orcs, commanding them to attack, to restrain this impossible resurrection. They hesitated, their natural cowardice warring with fear of their master's punishment. Finally, a dozen rushed forward, weapons raised. Talion moved through them like smoke. His body responded with speed and precision beyond human capability, enhanced by the wraith's ancient skill. Swords that should have struck him passed through after images. Hands that grasped caught only shadows. He was there and not there, solid and insubstantial. But the power was unstable, uncontrolled. Talion's consciousness swam in confusion, overwhelmed by Celebrimbor's presence in his mind. The wraith's thoughts crashed against his own, memories thousands of years old flooding through his awareness. He saw the forging of rings, the betrayal of Sauron, the torture and death of everything Celebrimbor loved. The weight of it staggered him. The Black Hand seized that moment of vulnerability. Dark energy wrapped around Talion's limbs, dragging him to the ground. More orcs piled on, their combined weight pinning him despite his struggles. The Black Hand approached, blade raised for a final strike. But then, light exploded outward from Talion's body, silver and blinding. The orcs were thrown back, some disintegrating into ash before they hit the ground. The Black Hand himself was forced to retreat, shielding his face from the intensity. When the light faded, with body trembling, the effort of containing power he did not understand. The Black Hand studied this new development with what might have been respect. Interesting. The bright Lord returns, but you are weak, newborn thing. This body cannot contain what you are. He gestured, and the remaining orcs began to fall back in organized fashion, clearly following a predetermined plan. We will meet again when you understand what you have become, when you realize the true purpose of your resurrection. Before Talion could respond, before he could even process the words, the Black Hand and his forces melted into the darkness beyond the gate. They left behind only corpses and destruction. The entire garrison massacred, the Black Gate compromised, and in the center of it all stood Talion, alone with the bodies of his wife and son. The power drained from him suddenly, leaving him weak and shaking. He collapsed to his knees beside Eorith and Deerhail, reaching for them with hands that trembled. Their bodies were already growing cold. No amount of wraith power, no supernatural resurrection could return life to them. They were gone, truly and permanently gone. Talion tried to scream but found he could not. The sound caught in his repaired throat, trapped by something he could not identify. Grief crashed over him in waves, each one threatening to drown him completely. He gathered Deerhail into his arms, holding his son's small body against his chest, rocking slowly as if comforting the child after a nightmare. But this nightmare had no waking. A voice spoke in his mind, not his own thoughts, but another presence sharing his consciousness. I am Celebrimbor. We are bound now, you and I. Neither of us can die until our purpose is fulfilled. Talion wanted to reject this, to expel the invader from his mind, to die as he was meant to. But he found he could not. The binding was absolute. He was trapped in his own body, forced to continue existing when all he wanted was oblivion. Get out, he whispered. Leave me. Let me die with them. I cannot. Celebrimbor's voice carried its own tone of sorrow. The ritual has tied us together. Your death is my death, and I cannot pass from this world while vengeance remains incomplete. We are prisoners of the same fate. Talion lowered Dihail's body gently beside Ioreth's, arranging them as if they were merely sleeping. He wanted to bury them properly, to give them the rights they deserved, but survival instinct warned that remaining here was death. The Black Gate was compromised. More orcs would come. He could not defend this position alone, no matter what power now resided in his flesh. He stood slowly, every movement feeling wrong, as if his body no longer quite belonged to him. Looking down at his family one last time, he made a promise that would define everything to come. I will find him, the Black Hand, everyone who aided him, every orc who stood by and watched. I will kill them all, and then, only then, will I allow myself to rest. Celebrimbor's presence in his mind pulsed with approval, and something else, a recognition of shared purpose. Then we are aligned. The Black Hand serves Sauron. Through him we strike at the Dark Lord himself. Your revenge and mine walk the same path. Talion did not respond. He could not trust himself to speak, to think too clearly about what he had just agreed to. All that mattered was the promise. Find them, kill them, avenge his family. Everything else, including questions about the nature of his resurrection or the goals of the wraith sharing his body, could wait. He moved through the ruined garrison like a ghost, searching for supplies. His own quarters were destroyed, but other rangers had kept equipment he could use. He gathered weapons, a bow and quiver, dried rations, a water skin, a cloak. The mechanical nature of preparation helped, giving his mind something to focus on beyond the crushing weight of loss. As he worked, he became aware of new senses. He could see things that should have been invisible, spectral traces of where orcs had walked, ghostly impressions of violence that had occurred. When he concentrated, his vision shifted, showing him the world as Celebrimbor perceived it, a realm of spirits and energy that existed parallel to physical reality. More disturbing, he could feel the wraith's presence not just as a voice, but as a second consciousness, occupying the same space as his own. Their thoughts remained separate, but emotions bled through. Celebrimbor's ancient grief mixed with Talion's fresh agony, creating a feedback loop of suffering that threatened to overwhelm rational thought. Only the focus on immediate survival kept both of them functional. Talion left the Black Gate as dawn approached, moving south into Mordor proper rather than attempting to reach Gondor. The logic was cold and practical. Gondor offered safety and support, but it would also demand explanations he could not provide. How could he explain what he had become? How could he make anyone understand that he was both alive and dead, both one person and two? They would think him mad or corrupted. They might even see him as a threat, something to be contained or destroyed. More importantly, his quarry lay in Mordor. The Black Hand had retreated into Sauron's realm. To follow meant entering the heart of enemy territory alone, without support. It was suicide by any rational measure. Talion found he did not care. Death held no fear for someone who had already died, and if he could take the Black Hand with him into oblivion, the trade was acceptable. The landscape of Udin stretched before him, harsh and unforgiving. Ash fell like snow, coating everything in gray. The air tasted of metal and sulfur. In the distance, the towers of orc fortresses rose against the red sky. This was hell, and Talion was walking into it willingly, driven by grief and rage and the promise of vengeance. Behind him, the Black Gate stood violated and empty, its garrison slaughtered, its purpose failed. Ahead lay Mordor in all its terrible expanse, and within Talion's mind, Celebrimbor watched and waited, his own agenda hidden beneath apparent alliance. Neither man nor wraith spoke as they crossed the threshold. There was nothing left to say. The journey had begun, and consciousness returned slowly, dragging Talion from darkness into painful awareness. He lay face down in ash, body aching from injuries that should have killed him, but somehow had not. Memory crashed back in fragments. The massacre, Ioreth, Deerhail, the Black Hand, death, then impossible resurrection. He pushed himself to his knees, expecting agony, finding only dull discomfort. Looking down at his chest where the fatal throat wound had been, he saw unmarked skin beneath torn clothing. The cut had healed completely, not even a scar remaining. His hands were steady, despite everything, no tremor betraying the psychological trauma he had endured. This wrongness disturbed him almost as much as the memories themselves. Standing required effort, not from physical weakness, but from the crushing weight of grief threatening to drag him back down. The sun had risen fully now, such as it was in Mordor. Weak light filtered through perpetual cloud cover, painting everything in shades of gray and rust. He was perhaps a mile from the Black Gate, having walked through the night in a daze he could not quite remember. The voice returned, resonating inside his skull. "You are awake? Good. We have much to do." Talion's first instinct was to reject this presence, to somehow expel the invader from his mind. But he discovered that distinguishing where he ended and Celebrimbor began was impossible. Their consciousnesses were intertwined, separate thoughts in the same space. Fighting the Wraith meant fighting himself.
"What are you?" Talion asked aloud, his voice rough from disuse and trauma. Speaking seemed to help, made the situation feel slightly less insane. "I am Celebrimbor," the Wraith responded. "I was an elf smith of Eregion in the Second Age. I forged the Rings of Power alongside Sauron before his betrayal. He killed me and my family. I have existed as a wraith for thousands of years, bound to this world by my refusal to pass on while he endures." The information meant little to Talion in his current state. Ancient history seemed irrelevant compared to the immediate reality of his loss. "I don't care about your past. I care about killing the Black Hand. Can you help me do that, or are you just a parasite feeding on my corpse?" If Celebrimbor took effects, his voice did not show it. "I can help. I bring knowledge, power, and immortality of a sort. You cannot die while we are bound. Wounds that would kill a normal man will heal. Your body will not age or weaken. You are, for all practical purposes, already dead. What remains is purpose." Talion tested this claim carefully, drawing his dagger and pressing it against his palm. The blade bit deep, blood welling up instantly. Pain flared, sharp and real. But even as he watched, the wound began closing, skin knitting together with unnatural speed. Within seconds, only blood remained as evidence of injury. "This is what we are now," Celebrimbor continued, "neither fully alive nor truly dead. We exist in the space between, and that existence makes us powerful. But you must learn to use what I offer. Your body remains flesh, but it can channel energies that mortals cannot touch." Before Talion could respond, movement in the ash caught his attention. An orc patrol, 3 warriors, armed with crude swords and leather armor, approached from the east. They had not spotted him yet, their attention focused on their own conversation, a debate about who would get the largest portion of their next meal. Instinct screamed at Talion to hide, to avoid confrontation while he was alone and vulnerable. But another feeling rose alongside that instinct, dark and hungry. These were orcs. They served the same master as those who had murdered his family. Perhaps they had even been present at the Black Gate. The distinction did not matter. They were the enemy, and they were here. Talion moved before conscious thought caught up to action. His body responded with speed that shocked him, covering the distance to the patrol in seconds. The first orc died before he could raise his weapon. Talion's sword opening his throat in a spray of black blood. The sec managed a clumsy swing that Talion ducked easily, his counter-slash severing the orc's leg at the knee. The third orc, showing more sense than his companions, turned to flee. "Use the wraith," Celebrimbor's voice urged. "Focus on the feeling of death, of the space between worlds. Channel it through your will." Talion did not understand the instruction, but followed it anyway.
reaching out with something that was not quite his hand. Spectral energy manifested, silver and cold, extending from his fingertips like fog given purpose. It touched the fleeing orc's back, and suddenly Talion was moving, his body dissolving and reforming in an instant. He materialized directly behind the orc, blade already positioned. A single thrust ended the chase. The entire encounter had lasted perhaps 10 seconds. 3 orcs dead, and Talion was barely winded. He stared at his hands, watching the ghostly energy fade, trying to reconcile what he had just done with any understanding of reality. Moving through space instantaneously violated every law of nature he understood. That was Shadow Strike, Celebrimbor explained with something approaching satisfaction. One of many abilities we now possess. The Wraith can move between the spirit realm and physical world, carrying your body with it. With practice, you will master this and more. Talion cleaned his blade on the nearest orc corpse, forcing himself to focus on practical matters rather than existential questions. If we can do this, why couldn't you act before? Why need me at all? A wraith without flesh is limited, Celebrimbor admitted. I could observe, I could exist in the spaces between, but I could not act meaningfully in the physical world. Your body provides the anchor, the ability to affect reality. Together, we are far more than either could be alone. The exclamation felt incomplete, but Talion lacked energy to pursue it. He searched the dead orcs, finding little of value. Crude weapons, bits of dried meat that might charitably be called rations, and what appeared to be ears on a string, trophies from previous kills. He took what little could be useful and moved on, instinct driving him deeper into Udon, rather than attempting to leave Mordor. The landscape was brutal in its desolation. Nothing grew here except the hardiest scrub brush, twisted plants that seemed to absorb poison from the soil rather than nutrients. Volcanic vents released steam at irregular intervals, the heat distorting the air. Pools of water that might offer relief proved toxic, their surfaces filmed with chemical residue. This was land that rejected life, and yet life persisted in its most brutal forms. Orc camps dotted the wasteland, ranging from small patrols to large encampments housing dozens of warriors. Talion observed these from distance, using rocky outcroppings and ash drifts for cover. Part of him wanted to attack every group, to kill everything that served Sauron. But reason prevailed. He was alone, untrained in his new abilities, and ignorant of Mordor's true dangers. Charging blindly into superior numbers was suicide, and he could not afford to die before completing his revenge. As he watched one particularly large camp, something changed in his vision. The world seemed to shimmer, colors fading to shades of gray and blue. Orcs appeared as glowing figures, their life force visible through walls and tents. He could see their movements, track their patrols, identify leaders by the intensity of their glow. Wraith sight, Celebrimbor supplied. You are seeing the world as I do. The spiritual essence beneath physical form. It allows you to track enemies, find hidden objects, and see connections between things. Learn to shift between normal and wraith vision at will. It is essential for survival here. Talion practiced the transition, finding he could trigger the change with focused thought. Normal sight returned in a rush of color and detail, then faded again to spectral blue with another mental push. The ability was disorienting, but obviously valuable.
Being able to track enemies through obstacles changed everything about tactical planning. As he experimented with his new senses, a sound reached him that did not belong. Not the harsh guttural speech of orcs or the industrial noise of their camps, but something else. Singing. A voice both beautiful and wrong. Familiar melody twisted into minor keys. Words too slurred to understand clearly. Talion approached cautiously, using rock formations for cover, expecting some new horror. What he found instead was a creature he recognized from stories, though seeing one in person was another matter entirely. The being was humanoid but wrong in every detail. Too thin, limbs elongated beyond human proportion, skin pale and corpse-like, eyes huge and luminous in a gaunt face. It clutched at the ground, occasionally bringing handfuls of dirt and ash to its mouth, chewing and spitting, searching for something. Gollum. Talion knew the name from intelligence reports. A creature that haunted the misty mountains and sometimes ventured into Mordor. Dangerous, insane, and possessing knowledge of secret paths that defied mapping. Looking at him now, Talion saw only a pitiful wretch, barely alive, consumed by some obsession that had reduced him to this state. The creature's head snapped up, fixing those enormous eyes on Talion, despite his concealment. Yes, we seize it. We seize the Bright Lord. Sneaky, tricksy, but not sneaky enough. No precious. Talion emerged from cover, keeping his hand near his sword. You can see him, the wraith? Gollum laughed, a sound like stones scraping together. Oh yes, we can see. We sees what others cannot. Yes, we does. The Bright Lord is back again after so long sleeping. But different now. Yes, different. Wearing dead man's face, using dead man's hands. His head tilted at an unnatural angle. What did precious rangers do to deserve such fate? What crime brings such punishment? The casual cruelty of the observation stung, but Talion kept his expression neutral. I need to find someone, the Black Hand. Can you help, or are you just another obstacle to remove? Gollum's demeanor shifted instantly, fear replacing mockery. Black Hand, no, no, no. Too dangerous, too dark, too close to the eye. Cannot go there, will not go there. Gollum wants to live. Yes, precious, wants to stay in one piece. I'm not asking you to fight, Talion said, forcing patience into his voice. Just point me in the right direction. Tell me where his forces are strongest, where he might be found. The creature considered this, having an apparent conversation with himself, different voices and tones emerging from the same throat. One voice wanted to help, the other feared involvement, and they argued back and forth in disturbing fashion. Finally, a decision seemed to be reached. Perhaps we helps, but Tricksy Ranger must promise. Yes, must swear. Gollum wants something too precious. Fair trade. Nothing for free in Mordor. No. Celebrimbor's voice carried warning in Talion's mind. Be careful. This creature is older and more cunning than he appears. Any bargain made will bind you. Talion ignored the advice, focused on the immediate goal. What do you want? Gollum's expression became sly, calculating. Information, yes, precious. We wants to know about the Bright Lord. What it wants, where it goes, what it plans, and we wants protection, yes. Dead Ranger is powerful. can keep Gollum safe from nasty orcs and cruel captains. Travel together, yes. Help each other, scratch backs, be friends. The proposal was absurd on its face. Trusting Gollum was obviously foolish. The creature was clearly unhinged, motivated by alien concerns, and liable to betray him at the first opportunity. Yet Talion found himself considering it anyway. He knew nothing about Mordor's geography or politics. Gollum, despite his madness, obviously possessed extensive knowledge of the realm. The practical value outweighed the obvious risks.
Fine, Talion agreed. Guide me, help me find the Black Hand's forces, and I'll keep you alive. Betray me, and being immortal won't save you from what I'll do. Gollum nodded eagerly, apparently satisfied with the arrangement. Yes, yes, good trade, fair trade. Come, Gollum knows paths, secret ways, places orcs don't go. Follow, but not too close, precious. Gollum needs space, yes, needs room to breathe. They traveled together through the wasteland, an unlikely partnership born of mutual need. Gollum moved with surprising grace despite his appearance, navigating terrain with intimate familiarity. He led Talion around obvious dangers, pointing out patrols before they came into view, warning of unstable ground and hidden crevices. As they walked, Gollum spoke constantly, maintaining what seemed to be multiple ongoing conversations with himself. Occasionally, he would address Talion directly, asking questions about Celebrimbor that were unsettlingly perceptive. The bright lord forged rings, yes, precious, made terrible circles of gold that bound and betrayed. Does it want to make more? Does it hunger for that power again? Celebrimbor's presence in Talion's mind stirred uncomfortably but did not respond. The wraith's silence felt telling, suggesting the question touched on truth he preferred not to acknowledge. They reached a ridge overlooking a large orc settlement by midday. Dozens of tents clustered around a central structure, larger and more permanent than the others. Warriors moved between buildings with purpose, rather than the aimless wandering common to smaller camps. This was a command post of some kind, possibly housing a captain or even a war chief. There, see precious. Gollum pointed with a long finger. Black Hand's servants gather. Yes, they do. Orders come from that place, sent to lesser orcs who bow and scrape and obey. Not Black Hand himself. No, he is elsewhere, in great tower with eye watching. But his captains are there, nasty things with scars and names and followers. Talion studied the camp through wraith sight, seeing the patterns of movement, identifying the strongest life forces. One orc in particular glowed brighter than the others, a massive warrior covered in tribal markings and crude armor. The creature stood in the center of the camp, bellowing orders that sent lesser orcs scurrying to obey. The large one, Talion said. Who is he? Gollum made a distressed noise. That is Shaka Pitfighter. Yes, precious. Earned name in the fighting pits. Killed so many to reach the top. Now serves Black Hand, commands this region, crushes any who challenge. Very strong, very cruel, very dangerous. Celebrimbor's voice held interest. A captain. If you kill him, his subordinates will compete to fill the void. The power structure will destabilize. More importantly, killing captains and war chiefs will send a message. The Black Hand will hear that someone hunts his servants. He will be forced to respond. The logic was sound, but Talion hesitated. Looking at the camp's size and organization,
Calculating the number of warriors, the assault seemed impossible. Even with his new abilities, he was still one person against dozens. The mathematics of combat did not favor him. But what did he have to lose? Death held no fear. Pain was irrelevant compared to what he had already endured. And if he could start dismantling the Black Hands organization, if he could begin his revenge in earnest, then the risk was acceptable. "Tell me about him," Talion said to Gollum. "What are his weaknesses? What does he fear?" Gollum's head bobbed enthusiastically. "Oh yes, Gollum knows things, hears things in the dark. Shaka fears fire, yes, precious. Burned badly once in the pits. Still has nightmares. Also fears Caragors, the nasty cat beasts. One killed his brother, ate him while Shaka watched. Yes, it did. Uses these fears, make him weak, make him stupid." The information provided tactical options. Talion had noticed several fire pits in the camp, maintained for cooking and warmth. Caragors might be harder to exploit, but if he could create enough chaos, fear would spread regardless of specific phobias. He waited for nightfall, using the hours to observe patrol patterns and identify entry points. Gollum disappeared during this time, claiming he needed to eat and could not stomach watching what Talion planned to do. The creature promised to return by dawn, a promise Talion gave even odds of being kept. As darkness fell, Talion moved toward the camp. His approach utilized every skill developed during years as a ranger, combined with new abilities that made him far more dangerous than he had ever been. He could see through walls, move through shadows with unnatural silence, strike from angles that should have been impossible. The first kill was easy. A sentry standing at the cab's edge, eyes scanning outward, never expecting attack from within his own perimeter. Talion appeared behind him using Shadow Strike, blade finding the gap between helmet and armor before the orc could cry out. The body fell silently, dragged into shadow where it would not be immediately discovered. The second kill was nearly as simple. Another sentry, this one distracted by conversation with a companion. Talion took them both in quick succession. Twin strikes that left no time for warning. 2 more bodies hidden. 2 more enemies removed from the board. But the third attempt went wrong. The orc turned at the last moment, some instinct warning him of danger. He managed a brief shout before Talion's blade found his throat. Enough noise to alert nearby warriors. Shouts rose across the camp as orcs grabbed weapons and began searching for the intruder. Talion did not try to hide. Instead, he walked toward the center of the camp, blade drawn, making no effort at concealment. Orcs converged on him from all directions, 24 warriors surrounding him in seconds. In the camp center, Shaka emerged from his tent, massive sword in hand, attracted by the commotion. "You," the war chief rumbled, voice like grinding stone, "you are the one they speak of. The ranger who will not die, the grave walker." He laughed, the sound genuinely amused. "Good, I was growing bored. Kill him, but keep him alive. I want to understand what makes dead flesh walk." The orcs attacked in a rush. No coordination or tactics, just brutal, overwhelming force. Talion met them with equal brutality, enhanced by abilities that made him more than human. His sword moved faster than should be possible, each strike precise and lethal. When enemies pressed too close, he used Shadow Strike to relocate, appearing behind them, beside them, above them, in defiance of physics. But there were too many, and even supernatural skill had limits. Blades found openings in his defense, scoring hits across his arms and legs. Pain flared with each wound, genuine and debilitating despite his immortality. Blood flowed, weakness crept into his limbs, and for a moment, Talion thought he might fail here, his revenge ending before it truly began. Then Celebrimbor's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop holding back. Use what I give you fully. Embrace the Wraith." Talion surrendered control, letting the ancient spirit take command. His body moved with inhuman grace, Wraith energy flowing through every motion. He did not just fight the orcs, he dominated them. Spectral hands reached into minds, breaking wills, planting fear. Some orcs fled, others turned on their companions, and still others simply collapsed, their minds shattered by contact with power they could not comprehend. Shaka watched his warband disintegrate with growing rage. Finally, he charged forward himself, massive sword raised for a strike that would split Talion from crown to groin. The blade fell with terrible force and speed. Talion caught it. His hands, wrapped in wraith energy, stopped the sword mid-swing. Shaka's eyes widened in disbelief, then fear, as spectral power flowed up the blade and into his body. Visions assaulted him, memories not his own. The torture and death of Celebrimbor's family played in his mind with perfect clarity. He saw what awaited those who opposed the Bright Lord, understood the futility of resistance. When Talion released him, Shaka fell to his knees, broken in body and spirit. The mighty war chief, who had killed hundreds in the fighting pits, who had commanded entire regions of Mordor, was reduced to a sobbing wreck. His remaining warriors saw this and broke, fleeing into the night, spreading word of what they had witnessed. Talion stood among the corpses in ruin, breathing heavily, body aching from a dozen wounds that were already healing. He had won, but the victory felt hollow. Looking at Shaka's broken form, he saw not just an enemy defeated, but something darker. He had not just killed, he had destroyed, not just fought, but dominated. The line between justice and cruelty seemed thin. Celebrimbor's voice held satisfaction. "Well done, the first of many. Each captain we kill weakens the Black Hand's grip. Each fortress we take brings us closer to our goal." Talion did not respond. He searched Shaka's tent, finding maps and orders, intelligence that would be valuable. The war chief's memories, accessible through some wraith ability he was still learning to control, revealed locations of other captains, hints about the Black Hand's movements, fragments of useful information. By the time Gollum returned at dawn, Talion had turned the camp into a message. Bodies arranged in patterns, symbols carved into tent walls, the whole site transformed into a declaration of intent. Let the Black Hand see this. Let him understand that someone was coming for him, methodically and inevitably. "Oh, my precious, what has it done?" Gollum whispered, looking at the carnage with wide eyes. "What terrible work, what dark deeds. The orcs will speak of this for years. Yes, they will. Grave Walker, they call it now. The ranger who walks among the dead and makes more dead wherever he goes." Talion cleaned his blade carefully, restoring it to pristine condition despite the night's blood. "Good. Let them speak. Let the stories spread. I want every orc in Mordor to fear the darkness, to wonder if I'm coming for them next. I want the Black Hand to hear my name and know that his death approaches." They left the ruined camp behind, moving deeper into Mordor, guided by information
extracted from Shaka's memories. More camps lay ahead, more captains to kill, more steps on a path that would lead eventually to the Black Hand himself. The journey had truly begun, and Talion discovered within himself a capacity for violence and vengeance that both horrified and sustained him. Behind them, survivors would spread tales of the Grave Walker, the ranger who could not die, who struck from shadows and disappeared like smoke. Those tales would grow in the telling, becoming legend even as they happened. And somewhere in the depths of Barad-dûr, the Black Hand would hear these stories and smile, knowing that everything was proceeding exactly as planned.